everybody. This is Rory Francis, and you're watching another episode of Igniting American Manufacturing. And today we have Ray Lake with First Coast Manufacturers Association. And we were sitting here talking. We probably could have talked for hours when we actually need to start shooting. And we kind of just wrapped up with why I'm doing this show. And you know, the purpose of it is to pull voices together that have a common message about manufacturing and how manufacturing builds a prosperous middle class and helps rise up the nation as a whole. And that's what this show's about. You know, equal opportunity. Everybody is welcome to speak here. Fellow podcasters, competitors. I just want to pull voices together. I want to get the message out there. You know, I'm the son of immigrants. My mother and father both immigrated from Ireland, and they instilled in me a love of this nation. They were very grateful for all its offerings, and I believe in this nation. So that's the purpose of this show. Well, that's my soapbox, and then we're actually going to start talking to Ray here. So Ray, welcome to the show.
It's Lake, actually. People get it backwards a lot, but that's okay.
Sorry about that. Lake Ray.
Lake Ray, and people get it backwards all the time.
Okay.
So it's not a problem, but you know, I'm really happy to be here with you. Happy to talk about our manufacturers, talk about things that are so important. You know, before we got started, we were talking about everything from the economy, where the direction of things are going, where things are happening in terms of manufacturers. So it's going to be an exciting time for you and I to share a few thoughts.
Yeah. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Let's start just, you know, real simple. So First Coast Manufacturing Association, what's your mission?
So it started off back in 1989. It was because there were policies that were coming out locally primarily, and these policies were not necessarily friendly to manufacturers. Now, there's all kinds of manufacturers, as you and I both know. There are those that are more on the technical side and more on the heavy side. And some of the leaders decide they want to push some of the heavy side out. These might have been everything from those that create and make fragrances, from our terpenes that come out of pine trees, and some that are paper product related. And so they decided that they were going to push some of that out, and they made such an overreach they were going to push out of all things Maxwell House here. And people said, "What are you doing?" You know, and so they at that point got together in 1989, and they said, let's have a voice for manufacturers. So the association was started with 10 principal companies, many of which have either merged or are part of the association, but they merged into different names from back in the beginning.
How many members now?
Currently we have about 200 members.
Wow, that's some good growth.
And these are company members that we have. And if you look at the number of employees that the association represents, it's about 20,000 employees that all of the companies that are there in the association.
Okay, all right. So over 200. Are you still growing? You're seeing growth?
You know, associations, and it's very interesting with our association because management teams change, leadership changes, and so we see kind of an ebb and flow of companies that come in, and we're in a growth pattern because people are excited about where things are going. But what we find is that companies who've been with us for a number of years, there's a shift and they disappear for a little while and then they come back. So we have a core of about 200 companies that we've been dealing with. Sometimes it's a little larger, might be a little smaller, just kind of depends on what's going on at the time, and it depends on what those issues are, because associations a lot are driven by, if you will, the fire issues, you know, what's striking their needs and their interest. And so we're continual out there, continually looking to ways in which we can meet the needs of our manufacturers. Okay. You know, from the beginning, we were talking about being there as a voice for policy. We took that not just locally, we took it to the state, and we're also interacting even at the federal level. But as time went forward, it's like, how do you broaden that? So we were discussing earlier about the workforce. And how do you improve the workforce? We also,
you're getting to all my questions, by the way, so you keep going.
Yeah, how am I doing?
You're doing great.
Yeah. So you know, as we were looking at that, the thing that we were taking a really deep dive on is how do you broaden, you know, the the need of the association.
So
Not
you
just
actually
these
have a
single
workforce development committee, is that correct?
We do, and that committee focuses on a couple of things, Roy. The first is it is how do you attract, maintain, and train the workforce that you have.
Well, that, and I speak about workforce development quite a bit, and the first conversation is about hiring and training and upskilling. The other part, a lot of people forget, it's equally important, and maybe more so important, is that, and you mentioned it, that retention part.
It's the retention. Companies spend a lot of money investing in training employees, and
they also, the other benefit, once you train them, as you do recruit, they become the trainers.
They become the trainers, and also they become, in part, the spokespersons for the company out in the community. When somebody's out there, they can help identify good employees or prospective employees as well. And so, we take a deep dive on that. But we also work with our education institutes from our universities.
Like I said, you answered all my questions here.
And we work with that because it's two components. One is you need the workforce, you need to protect and keep the workforce, but then also you need the workforce that has the knowledge, the skills, and as things go, and as we talk further today, I'm sure we're going to be talking about, what that worker of the future is and how to mold that, how to make that into something. And so as an association, we've been, taking a deep dive on that. We do have some training programs at our association. It's become very, very popular. We've had about 1,000 people go through this over the last several years. We have classes that we have about 25 to a class, and it's taking those that are leaders in, we call it frontline supervisors or leadership academy.
Sure.
And it's those that that are coming in and they're wanting to move them up. And as they begin to move them up, it's not a surprise, people aren't innate with their leadership skills. And so we bring them in and teach them, how to communicate. Communication is so important in every aspect of our lives. And so we teach them how to communicate, what it is that's going on in the business. And so when they come out, they then are at least at one tier of leadership. And now we have 3 different tiers so that you move all the way up into the plant supervisor level.
Nice. So, and you're touching on everything here. I've thrown up a graphic several times on the show, and maybe we'll put it on towards the end here. And it's a picture of 3 cogs and working in concert. One is government, the other one is academia and industry. So we talked a little bit about government. I want to get back into that
Sure.
in a second here.
Absolutely.
But you talked a little bit about education and how is the Jacksonville schools, the colleges, and how are they serving? Are they meeting? Are they helping industry? Are you guys talking together?
We're working very diligently with that. We have a couple of the state colleges here in the area. We have, of course, first here locally. We got the First Coast. FSCJ.
They have an advanced technology lab, right?
Yes, they do. Then we have St. John's, that's just a little south of us, serving the St. Johns County area, Putnam County, and a little bit to the south. They're both very engaged in technical training. I was recently talking with the president of FSCJ, and they're going through a deep dive right now. And what they're doing is they're saying, what are the needs? What is it? And I think for years what's happened is that we've kind of turned, I won't call it a blind eye, but we've kind of turned away from connecting with our colleges. And so you've got good people that are trying to put skill sets out there, but those skill sets and what you're finding for the companies aren't necessarily a match. And so we're working on how to find that match, to go in. And
that comes to that cog part,
That's right.
I mean, the school needs to build they need input. They really need input from industry, local companies and manufacturers on what the skill sets are, and work that into the curriculum.
Exactly. And so now, again, we were talking a little bit earlier before we got on about what does that worker of the future look like. And, I think for years we have kind of gotten into a mindset of manufacturing is heavy with your hands, hard work. And there are certainly components of that, but a lot of it that you're very aware of, and where a lot of things are going, is it's going to be not, it's going to have some of the hand functions that we're traditional, but a lot of it's going to be digital platforming, understanding how things are made, and putting them together. And so, we're in this very transformational time that the worker is going to have a set of skills, some of the traditional skills, but then, now the new skills. And so our education industry
needs to adapt,
has to adapt to it. Over at UNF, we've been working with UNF for years. We actually have a scholarship program that we've helped them with. It's an endowment that we set up over the years to help them to bring in those that are on the manufacturing side. And they've got a program specifically dedicated to manufacturing over there. So you got the state college level, which gives people a multitude of things, everything from the hand skills to the technical skills and the higher education skills. And then you got the higher side of UNF that's out there. You have companies like JTech, great company that's out there for teaching people. They're working very, very much on everything from trucking to welding to auto mechanics and things like that. Things that somehow or another we kind of pushed aside and forgot.
Yeah, well, we've stigmatized, last couple of generations about vocational, and you talked about, the heavy lifting in factories, and that's predominantly is not the case anymore. Now you have the association put out, is it yearly magazine?
We put out, it's bi-yearly.
Bi-yearly.
Yes.
And I read through it, almost all of it, to be honest with you, and I love the graphic on it, and you guys emphasized AI and digital transformation. And aware that I speak about digital transformation and smart manufacturing and robotics quite a bit. The new factory today, like you said, is going to be automated. When Harding was on here with B2B and Manufacturing Matters and talks about cobots and the cobots and the robots, and the automation takes a whole different skill set. Are our schools addressing that? PLC training?
They're beginning to. It's. I think, and I'm not being critical of our education institutes, but what's happened is they've kind of operated somewhat in their own belief of where they're going, and their focus is, let's be honest, it is about education, and when you change that dynamic, it's like this is now becoming a dialogue, and the dialogue is, what is it you need? I don't need to be cranking out something for somebody to get a degree. I need to be cranking out something to give somebody a degree, a skill set, and a career path.
What about certification? I mean, does the manufacturing or factory worker of today need a degree, or is he better suited with an associate's or maybe some certifications? Well, and I don't want to downplay it. No, four-year degree is a valuable thing.
Let's dissect that in a couple of different ways. I think what happened, and you and I came out of the error that when I was getting out of school, and I'm an engineer, I went to University of Florida, and when I was coming out, everybody was talking about that we were going to be into a service industry, and it's like, well, great, what does that mean? Even at that time, not knowing much about, economics, it didn't sound good. It was, so who's going to be serving what and for what? But, you're throwing and turning your back on where we've been. So I think as you begin to start looking at that, what happened was, the conversation is get a degree, get a degree, get a degree. Yeah. And so this was impounded into the students, it was impounded into the parents, and the parents are hearing, well, obviously, if I want my children to succeed, I need to get them a degree. And I think you and I both would agree there are those that are going to be very scholarly, and they deserve to be in there and should be in there because that's where we're going to get certain types of innovation. But I think the other side of that is that, somehow we shun somebody that didn't get a degree.
Yeah.
And
stigmatized them, a whole generation.
We stigmatize them. And so do we need a certification, or is this more of something that we're giving somebody something that they have earned, and it says, you now have effectively those degrees, those certifications that put you in a position. Certainly there are companies, and certainly there are going to be standards that are going to be looking at the types of certifications, the people that are working on, going down the line. But I think that the worker of the future is going to need some certification, certainly some technical training, and certainly some of the traditional hand skills.
Well, you touched on a lot of things, and Dan D'Amico with Prosperous America talks about service-based economies, and in the late 70s, our economy shifted, and a lot of economists were advising, DC and our lawmakers that our place in the world was to be a service-oriented, and that we weren't going to build things anymore. And 1979, 1980, saw a huge shift. It was the start of offshoring, and we lost 90,000 factories within a few years, and 7.5 million jobs. And they're coming back.
They're coming back, and there's a multitude of reasons why. When they moved off, first it was somebody got this bad idea that we'll just be a service economy. Well, let's talk for just a minute about what economies are based on. And I always enjoy talking about this because economies are based on three things: you make it, you mine it, or you grow it. And you can tear it down, you can look at any angle you want, but it gets back down to you make it, you mine it, or grow it.
Not a lot of money in managing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Limited amount.
Or consuming it. I mean, if you're in service, then primarily you're going to be in the consumption side of things. So when you look back in the in the 70s and 80s and then in the 90s even, it was, where can I find cheap labor? So let's divide the cost of a product out. And the things that you and I have a passion for and an interest in terms of the digital platform and the digital age that we're moving into. So back in time, the average product cost about 40 to 50% for labor. It was about 20 to 25% material and about 20 to 25% energy. You and I remember the day when we said it was made in Japan, and it wasn't a good thing. It was, considered a cheap product.
Sure.
And we used to coin the phrase of, we don't make it like we used to. Well, today I think you and I both could look and say, I'm glad we don't make it like we used to, because we've got so many different skills and things that we can put in there. But I think if you kind of look what happened, as jobs were being taken off, was because the cost of the labor was so much more significant. Today, there are so many different companies that are out there, and the cost of the labor is down to like 10%. And it's because of the digital platforming.
Yep, digital platforming, and I talk about, if we're going to compete, and you tell me wrong, we're going to compete locally, regionally, and globally, we need to employ AI, digital transformation, smart manufacturing. We need to use robots and limit, some of our labor costs. But labor costs, and when we talk about competitors right now, we're predominantly talking about China. There was a day, when we had that conversation about Japan. We remember when, the unions were, drive a Toyota, you drive American truck on your construction site. It was a big deal. That's not the case anymore. And that shifted. And there was a time when China was, for just making cheap products. That's not the case anymore as well. The funny thing is, manufacturing and the Industrial Revolution made this country into what it was.
No question.
And, I write about the age of exceptionalism, in the 50s and 60s, and we were out peaking manufacturing. when we offshored, China, here's some, 30 years ago, the average daily income in China was $1.90. They have embraced manufacturing. In the past 30 years, they have lifted 800 million, not 80, not 800 million people out of poverty by manufacturing. Manufacturing brings prosperity, whether it's in China or the United States. I think that, manufacturing was coming back to the States pre-COVID, slowly. COVID exposed some supply chain, correct me if I'm wrong, supply chain issues and some cybersecurity issues and IP issues, and it's coming back. And some government incentives. It's coming back so rapid. We need to make sure we do it right at this point.
Yeah. So let me see if I can share something with you. I'm sorry I don't know the source, but it is something that has been out there. And it goes back to about the time that the COVID shutdowns and the supply chain issues were happening. It doesn't change what I'm going to say, and that is that, interestingly, the world wants U.S. made products. Now, there are a multitude of reasons why. The first of which is it's a product you can stand behind. The quality that goes into it is known, identifiable, and usually can be even traced to where and how it got there. The problem with a lot of Chinese products is that you don't know what the product is, you don't know the quality, and you don't have any QA/QC, quality assurance and quality control that goes into it.
Or was it made, I'm going to say it, ethically?
That drives you back in. That drives you back in.
I'm going in the deep end here. I went all in.
You're going in another direction. We can have a whole other conversation on. But what happened is that they were cheap products, and so they didn't last long. They found that people are willing to pay a little bit more for a quality product that they know they can depend on, and people will stand behind it. You get a Chinese product, it's like, it breaks, you go, well, it's made in China, and it was cheap anyway.
They are improving, though.
They're improving, but also their culture has been such that, when you go over to one of their ports, it's like, you go to the first gate, and the first gate is, let me see who you are. The second gate is, let me check what you've got. The third gate, and they've got like 5 different people that they're going through just to get there. It's not a necessity by any means, but they're putting people to work, and so they don't have a mindset of what you and I know is the lean or the productive output.
No, labor's cheap.
And it's because labor's cheap.
I've actually worked in China. I've been part of projects over there, and I've seen it evolve and improve. Over past 20 years, I started out there. I've seen it improve, but yes, yeah.
Well, I had a project in India quite a few years ago now, and it was really very interesting because when I went out to this job site, it was like, the people that was being transported with, there was a stop. It's like, well, what's going on? And it was a road crew. And the road crew had about 75 people, and they were out getting rocks and putting them on the road to build and support the road base. And it was like, it just, it's so foreign, so different, but it's because the cost of labor was so cheap, and so there wasn't anything driving it. Here we have a different story. And the different story is that the worker in the United States is by far the most productive worker in the world.
People would argue with this, and so I've worked in Europe. I've worked in Asia. I've been in factories in both, and I can tell you something. I hold in America a factory worker, in high esteem, and we can compete against anybody.
There's no question about it. The problem, and when I've had some work and some things in Europe, is that they believe it's a step process. They don't see where they're going; they just see the next step.
Yeah.
And I'm not faulting anybody, and anybody that may be watching this. I'm not calling any of the Europeans down.
Our education system has its issues.
It does.
But the Chinese recognize this. we're a nation of innovators, and we're a nation of thinkers. We challenge, we think, and that is somehow, I don't, I'm going to say it's our culture and our education system.
It's our psyche.
We foster
Absolutely.
that independence
Absolutely.
and independent.
If you go back to the very
our strength.
The very founding of our country was such that you came to a land that you were going to develop and you were going to do, and so you had to succeed.
Succeed or perish.
Exactly. I had when I was in Scouts many years ago, my Scout leaders were World War II. A number of them were World War II veterans, and I remember them talking.
We're the same age. I had the same Scoutmasters.
And they were I remember sitting around the campfire and and hearing what they said, and I remember very distinctly, and it's important. It's a really important piece because it's who we are that it makes us different. And they said that they would watch the British Army moving, and as they would move, truck breaks down, they're over on the side waiting for a mechanic. What happens when the Americans were coming by? It's like truck breaks down, the guys are out there pulling this out and getting some wire and taping this thing out and get that thing going, but they were waiting.
I haven't heard that analogy before. That's a great analogy.
And if you went out onto the battlefield, one of the things that they realized that with the German tanks is that they made the mistake of putting a little pennant on the tank of the commander, and so when you took that guy out, no one knew what to do, and our psyche is that happens, somebody steps up, and we figure out how to go and do things. And so we're always being innovative, but it is who we have become culturally. And some of that's been squished and some of it's been lost.
You have a lot of pride in this country, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
You should.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people running us down. China's the biggest manufacturer in the world. We're number 2, but we're a huge manufacturer. We are independent, and the chip sector, when we get, a lot of that's over in Taiwan right now. We're the leader in innovation in designing chips, and that's much held a lot of people's feet to the fire. I'm still made as competitive that we're the innovator. We design this stuff. And what we've been doing is making great innovation and sending it off somewhere else to make it. That's changing, but we have that innovation piece. But it's our strength.
But Roy, some of it is changing because it's like, one, we don't want to depend on everybody else. The second is that what you get back, is it what you thought? And the third, even more troubling, is who may be putting little things in there. I'll just give what happened with Hamas in Israel. There were little things that were being put in that they didn't know what was going in. There were pagers and beepers and communicators and things like that. Who knows what's going into some of our things?
Well, now you're talking industrial espionage and you're talking cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
So when cybersecurity, and I'd say, I told you earlier that last year the conversation seemed to be dominated by digital transformation and AI.
Absolutely.
Today, and I'm going to correct myself, today it's about robotics and cybersecurity. Because that digital transformation, makes us more vulnerable to cybersecurity. Matter of fact, just in the news yesterday, I had someone here talking about 80% of our data moves on submerged cables.
Wow.
Apparently, 80% of our data, and it's our greatest risk is cybersecurity. Now, I build data centers, and I've always looked at physical protection of the data centers until someone opened my eyes just a couple of months ago where what greatest risk was. Just yesterday, apparently Russia was messing with some cables for Sweden or Estonia. I'm sorry, I would go somewhere up, but they were messing, and it was suspected that it was the Russians. That's reported. They were messing with cutting off internet and things of that nature. Huge risk. Huge risk to manufacturing.
It's been a number of years ago. I served on the city council, and here in Jacksonville, and when we were in a meeting, it was like things started happening that were funny. Just it wasn't a complete shut off. It was like odd things when we were looking for information right during the meeting, and it didn't stop the meeting, but afterwards we found out that it was a Chinese cyber attack that had happened, and so, it makes you ask the vulnerability of that. And so these two platforms, like you're referring to, the digital platform and the security of it are going to be essential. And I don't think there's any going back. There's no,
So
on any
smart manufacturer, industrial Internet of Things, increased devices, machine learning, they all have vulnerabilities, and so cybersecurity is a huge part of it. And then there's the physical stuff. And cybersecurity, I had retired Colonel Chris Budahas on here talking to cybersecurity. We can go down a rabbit hole and talk about that. And you talked about Chinese hacking.
You and I could talk about that. When I was over in the legislature, they were talking about, what those attacks could look like and what EMPs, could happen. And, so as we move into this, we're going to have to also have a keen eye on how to protect that as we move forward. And it's going to be essential because I think you would probably agree with me that if you're a company, if you're not making a transformation into digital platforming, and that's a very large discussion in and of itself, but if you're not going into digital platforming, there are companies today that are thriving that will not survive, and there are companies that haven't even started yet that will be thriving.
I agree with you. And we, I'm going to have you back to talk about cybersecurity. We might do a panel with Chris Budahas and a few other folks. I'm going to wrap up here, but I actually just want to touch one more thing. The association. You spend a little bit of time out at our state capitol talking to folks a little bit and advocating. Let's wrap up here. Just tell me what your efforts and what you guys are doing out there.
We're always looking at things. So you were referring earlier to workforce and the conversations on that. So we're looking at everything from grants to what the programs are, to have conversations with our university system across the state. We're also looking at everything from taxes, and to regulations. We have a new administration coming in Washington, and they're going to be taking a very serious look at it. Prior to this current administration coming in, there were in excess of 360,000 regulations on manufacturing. One of our shops that I was at yesterday,
so I got my notebook here. I'm going to do some research, and that is a huge number.
That's a big number.
360,000.
360. One of our companies I was with, we have monthly meetings. We call them general meetings with some of our manufacturers, and one of them was a company called Seal Shield, and they make products that are principally to go in for virus protection. And I'm talking about the physical virus, not the cyber viruses, but things to go into hospitals, where that hospitals are a very nasty place to be if you don't have to be there. A statistic that was there was that 1 in 20 people that go in a hospital come out with something more than what they started with. A disease is there.
Sure, I knew that actually.
So there's actually a big push on how do you control some of those viruses and get them out of there. And here's a company that has a number of different devices, but they can't get them out because of all things EPA. And it's like, well, what is EPA? And it's like, well, you got this, and all these different things. And so government has now moved to where that these regulatory agencies are just making regulations for the purpose of regulations, not making any sense, and ultimately bringing harm to the public. And so when we go over in February, and anybody who's watching this, I invite you to, look us up on First Coast Manufacturers Association, fcmaweb.com. I would love to have a conversation with you. Come join us over there.
Now you're going to be out there February 11th and 12th?
11th and 12th.
And you're meeting with the State Assembly?
Meeting with a number of our members of the legislature. Clay Yarbrough is a member of our staff. He's a senator for here in the Jacksonville area. There's only 40 senators, across the state. So we'll be meeting with our senators, with representatives, and we'll be pushing some policy. I will divert into one little thing that will be an important issue, and that's tangible tax. that the state of Florida has, and that is the tangible tax is that which is equipment that you own. It never goes away. So if you're manufacturers, you don't ever get to depreciate it off. And so, you know, when we start talking about how do you want to improve investment and getting investment back, you got to start looking at, you can't just keep taxing people and never get it off on equipment that they're buying and making investment in.
Sure. Well, I think, you know, you had me laughing a couple of times. There's probably 100 different rabbit holes we could have went down today.
You
so
and I,
we're going to have to have you back.
We could sit here, we could talk for hours. And
we probably will when we turn the camera off.
I would absolutely love that. And it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thanks for coming.
You know, and
We'll do it again soon.
I'll be looking forward to that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.